Welcome to another edition of Quoth Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I'm your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 29-year veteran writer, illustrator, and editor of comic, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games. And this is Booktober 2021, day 28. We are talking about the graphic novel adaptation of the classic 1970s science fiction series Windhaven, written by George R.R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame and Lisa Tuttle. The adaptation is by Lisa, and the art is by Elsa Charretier. Let's go ahead and get started on the talk on that book today. This is a book that was published by Bantam. Again, the writers are George R.R. Martin and Lisa Tuttle, adapted to graphic novel by Lisa Tuttle. Artist is Elsa Charretier. Colors by Lauren Affey and lettering by Bill Tortellini. The genre is science fiction. This was originally released in 2018. The original prose versions of the stories were released in 1974 to 1980. This is an adaptation of the prose fiction novellas that Martin and Tuttle wrote in the 70s that were collected into a full edition novel in 81. The story recounts events which occur on the fictional planet Windhaven. Its inhabitants are descendants of human space voyagers who crash-landed on the planet centuries before the events of this book take place. After the crash, the survivors spread out and settled among the many scattered islands of Windhaven's water world. In order to preserve the tenuous lines of communication between the islands and across vast seas, the stranded population constructed mechanically simple gliding rigs from available spaceship wreckage. The gliders could be kept aloft almost indefinitely in Windhaven's stormy atmosphere by their pilots. After centuries of using this practice as the principal means of maintaining social contact among the islands, Windhaven's flyers have developed a caste superior to the landsmen, meaning the people that don't do the flying. Additionally, pardon me, I got a tooth problem here for a second. All right. Additionally, the flyer cast maintains ownership of the flying rigs, commonly known as wings, by keeping them within the flyer families so that none of Windhaven's landsmen can aspire to ever wear them. These caste-based differences serve as the impetus for the novel's character-driven narrative. The story is about Maris, a young peasant girl who lives with her mother on the remote island of Lesser Amberley. Her father, a fisherman, was killed in an unspecified number of years before, and Maris hardly remembers him. Though Maris and her mother survive mostly as scavenging clam diggers, they also collect refuse that washes among the nearby beaches after violent coastal storms. They collect basically space wreckage if it comes up through the washing on land, and they give that to people. One early morning, Maris and her mother rise from bed and scour the beaches near their hovel for valuables after a particularly brutal tempest. Maris' search is largely fruitless, and she recovers little. Afterward, however, she has a pivotal encounter with one of Windhaven's resident flyers. Lesser Amberley itself is home to 3 flyers, one of whom, an adult male named Russ, lands on the shore near where Maris has concluded her search. She timidly approaches Russ, and during a chance meeting, he treats her with kindness, and she in turn reveals to him that her most ardent wish is to become one of the flyers. A few years later, as an young adult, she gets adopted by Russ, who, because of a serious injury, was forced to give up his life as a flyer. Customarily, flyer wings pass on to the oldest child of an established flyer. At the time of Russ's injury, however, Russ and his wife had not had children yet. So Russ, in response to Maris' enthusiasm, trained her to become a flyer and granted her the right to wear his rings. Since then, she had been acting as one of Lesser Amberley's 3 resident flyers by ferrying messages between Windhaven's colonies across the oceans. However, Shortly after Maris was entrusted with the wings, Russ's wife gave birth to a son, Call. So 13 years have passed, and he just turned 13. And it's just traditional that at 13, the young flyer becomes of age and replaces her parents as ceremonial owners of the family wings. In this case, Call is set to take Russ's wings back from Maris, as her claim to them is considered unlawful. However, she strongly desires to keep the wings for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that Call has failed to prove that he is or ever will become a competent flyer. Additionally, unbeknownst to Russ, it is actually Cole's dream to become a traveling singer and not a flyer. Things are further complicated because Maris loves Cole both as a sister and as a mother, the latter being a role she kind of gradually took on after Russ's wife died in giving birth to Cole. Maris, knowing that her desire to keep the wings is unrecognized by their ancient flyer code, ultimately wants Cole to fulfill his dream of becoming a singer so that it's not an issue. On the day that Cole is officially sent to take the wings, he commits a major piloting error and lands badly in front of Maris, Russ, and many of the important citizens of Lesser Amberley. He then refuses to take over the stewardship of the wings, and he reveals to Russ that he will pursue a life of a singer and musician instead. This ticks off Russ so badly that he responds by disowning both Maris and Call, and the wings are confiscated by one of Lesser Amberley's other flyers, Corm, who is a complete dick. Corm soon lets it be known that he intends to give the wings to a flyer from a neighboring village, and he maintains that Maris never had a claim on the wings to begin with, and she shouldn't have them. Maris decides that she must act quickly if she's ever going to have a chance to get the wings back. In the night, she steals them from Corm and flies to another island. There, she hands the wings over to flyer Dorel and intends to have Dorel call a flyers' council, a rare meeting where nearly of all Windhaven's flyers, in order to prove that she deserves the right to wear the rings. However, a flyer arrives and notifies Dorel that Corm has already called for a council to be held. So at the start of the council, Corm argues that Maris should be declared an outlaw and exiled because she stole the wings, she never had the right to wear the wings, blah, blah, blah. But Maris responds that Corm's attack skillfully convincing the other flyers that the family-based system of wing inheritance is unfair and archaic. The council then votes in favor of measures allowing for the creation of flyer academies, where any of Windhaven's citizens may learn to fly, and an annual flying competition during which aspiring flyers will be allowed to compete for a chance to win their own wings from retiring flyers. This council also grants Maris's request to keep Russ's wings. Flash forward to several years later, Maris attempts to help persons without flyer lineage or one wings train for the chance to compete for their own wings. Maris's loyalties to old friends often make her choices difficult, but she remains determined to push for more change and a fair chance for one wings in Windhaven society. As a result, she'll spend most of her spare time at Woodwings, which is the first flyer academy built after the historic council decision. Early on, Maris learns that the last of the other flyer academies has been closed due to a tragic accident. She's also told that one of its students is journeying to Woodwings in order to continue their training. When Maris meets the student, Val, she realizes that he is the original One Wing, a now infamous peasant man who wanted to set her wings away from one of Maris's oldest friends, a female flyer who belonged to a venerated flyer family in one of the first yearly competitions years ago. However, at the time that the competition was held, the Flyer Val Challenge was still in mourning after the recent death of her brother, so she was not mentally right in her head and was not really cleared to compete, shall we say. But the challenge was, still held up, and he got the wings. But his challenge was regarded by the flyer community as both dishonorable and despicable, and he's always been kind of a outsider and not welcome in the community as a result. Tragically, the defeated flyer committed suicide after losing her wings to Val. And this has to do with a lot of the self-identity with flyers. It's like, if you stop being a flyer, what's left? What are you? Type thing. And she just couldn't deal with not being a flyer anymore. Um, Though Val lost the wings after being beaten by another flyer in the following year's competition, he quickly proves his competence at wood wings and becomes close friends with one of the most promising students, a southern-born female one-wing named Sorella. Val and Sorella, along with 4 other students of lesser skill, will fly in the coming flyers competition. Assisting these students in the competition amongst her old friends forces Maris to face her previously unnoticed preconceptions, loyalties, and double standards in flyer society. After successfully beating a competent flyer born in the first 2 trials, um, Val is seriously beaten up and injured on the last day, preventing him from competing. Maris, who has come to respect Val and the rights of any flyer to compete with another, flies proxy in his place and wins his wings from Corm, which gets rid of Corm. Sorella also wins her wings against Maris's longtime friend Garth, whose health was failing at the time, and he needed to retire because he was very ill. Years later, flash forwarding again to the next installment of the story. Maris is an older woman now, and she attempts to fly in a storm and has a nearly fatal fall on the island of Theos. She awakes in the home of the local healer Evan, and over the course of a few months, impatiently awaits the recovery of her legs and left arm. When she can finally walk again, she learns that her head injury from the fall will prevent her from flying from now on, because it's like she's got it's like a concussion type syndrome, where if she gets up too high, she doesn't have the she'll black out, or she'll have the dizziness and can't control herself. So she'll never be able to fly again. And her wings are taken away from her and given back to her home island. In her grief, because, like I said, these very much like the other flyer who committed suicide earlier in the storyline, they have this self-identity with flying. And if without flying, what are you? In her grief, she attempts to distance herself from the other flyers and the burgeoning one-wing culture. She denies her previous flyer identity and attempts to become a new person and immerse herself in the work of a physician's assistant for Evan, who is now her romantic partner. Maris's brother Carl and his young daughter arrive and stay with them for a while. A theme in this chapter explores the depth of relationships that Maris has never experienced as a flyer, and she never grew any roots in any community because she was always flying and never had time to be a landbound, so to speak. However, she's urged to return to the center of the flyer world as an intermediary between the one-wings and the flyer-born when a one-wing flyer, imprisoned by a powerful island landowner, is hanged for a controversial crime. Maris blames herself for failing to lend her aid to avoid the execution of this flyer, and so uses her new community ties to scheme with the flyers. They create a growing circle of one-winged flyers dressed in black, circling the skies over the site of the execution in mourning and protest. Then she employs the power of the singers to tell the story of the wrongful execution and paint the landsman as a villain. She successfully gains cooperation between the one-wings and the flyer-born factions to come together as flyers and resolve this matter and this conflict peacefully, which forces the harsh and greedy landsman out of power. Maris then learns to balance her identity and community and chooses to stay with Evan instead of returning to teach young flyers at the academy. But then Evan surprises her by choosing to face his own fears and leaving the only home he's known to go with her so that she can be where she's truly needed at the academy. You'd think the story ends there, but they fast forward it a little bit more. And the story ends with a dying Maris in elder years receiving a singer at her bedside. She recites to the singer the words of a song that was written by her brother Carl, who had died some years before, and it is his last testament to Maris. At first, the singer is confused by Maris's requests, but ultimately agrees that the song and her legacy will be passed on in the manner in which Carl and she intended. What do I think about this? Well, truth be told, I was quite humbled. I'd never heard of this series before, and I'm pretty well versed in historical science fiction. But this was a very successful, award-nominated, award-winning series of novellas from the 70s, written by George R.R. Martin and Lisa Tuttle. And, I just hadn't heard of it, which, I guess, hey, you can't hear of everything. But it's just, I was rather surprised that I hadn't heard of it before. I thought it was a brand new story. And I was like, oh, this is cool, and then to find out the history of it was like even more interesting and to me. But, given the legacy it has, and it does have quite the legacy, I should have heard of it. But in effect here, we're getting 3 full stories and an additional 2 shorter works in one book. And Tuttle does an exceptional job adapting the work over to comics. Also, Charretier does a really nice job with the art as well. I'm not surprised by that. Elsa's very talented and one of the more underrated artists in the market these days. Maris as a character is very interesting, and she's a complex heroine as we go along throughout her lifetime. There's a really nice balance between world building, the social commentary about familial privilege versus meritocracy, the struggles of creating a self-identity and what happens when your identity is stripped away from you. And it's all crafted in a way that I think should speak strongly to teen and young adult audiences. Now, this book is priced $27. I happen to find it for $1 at Dollar Tree. And I definitely got far more than my money out of my money for that $1 than I ever could have expected. And truthfully, I feel like I almost cheated. And that I should have to go pay some more than I did just for the privilege of reading it. The fact that I not only never heard of this book when it came out in 2018, but that it didn't seem to get on the awards lists in the comics industry, given the pedigree of the story in the science fiction community, I think that's a shame. It demonstrates the lack of inclusion and awareness of the whole of the comics market, in my opinion. That having been said, if you can't find the comic, this graphic novel edition, try to seek out the prose edition. It's a Hugo and Nebula Award nominee and a Locus Award winner for Best Novella for the first third of the story, as well as other accolades it's received in prose. And I think that the whole should have been rewarded over here in the comics industry as well. Recommended for ages 13 and up. I give it 4.5 stars. Let's take a quick look at some of the artwork. Ted Davies says, good afternoon. Hey, Ted. Good to see you. We'll have to talk about getting you scheduled here shortly. But this is an early thing where here's Maris where she meets the flyer and gets treated well by Russ. And this is Russ training her to be a flyer with wood wings, more or less. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't say wood wings. They're glider wings made of wood. They're not the official silver wings of the metal that the official flyers one. But you practice with the glider first. But really well, nice done artwork here. Wood wings is the school, but this is later when she's wearing actual full silver wings. As you can see, she has to fly across these things, and there's dangers across the oceans, like these giant sea dragons. She's talking, this is where she's confronting Corm, and about who can fly and who actually earns the rights or should people be allowed to earn the right to try and become flyers? Now I'm going to turn on a light here. I'll try and get a little more light in here so you guys can see a little more of the artwork, because I didn't get everything scanned in, but I'm going to see very nice watercolor tone coloring. I don't know if it's digital watercolor or full-fledged watercolor, but it's very well done. This is Sorella in a competition. She kind of gets messed up. They check it out. One of her wings gets wrecked, and she's laughing. And she's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine." What are you laughing about? Don't you get it? One wing, because the one wing's shot. And they're all, anybody who's not an official full flyer is called a one wing. Kind of a derogatory term, but I want to get to the whoops. It's very well designed, by the way, as well. So, and then here's the epilogue, and it's like 30 years after the main story. This is where she has the singer visit her at her bedside. All very well done. Highly recommended. Okay. Tomorrow's book will be a prose fiction story, Nevermore, by Harold Schechter. It's Edgar Allan Poe and Davy Crockett as kind of doing Sherlock Holmes and Watson in 1880s Baltimore. So that'll be a real interesting story. So we'll see you tomorrow with that. Later today, we will have What Did You Get This Week? I haven't got a chance to set the time for that just yet. But that will be later this afternoon or early evening. Again, tomorrow is Nevermore by Harold Schechter. Saturday, we'll be talking about the book Retrograde by Peter Caldron, and we'll have our Classic Horror Movies Night Part 2. Probably going to be talking about vampire movies, horror of Dracula, a couple of other ones out off the top of my head. And then Sunday, closing out the month, on Halloween, we'll have Graveyard Wars by A.J. Lieberman and Andrew Sebastian Kwan, a Sunday live draw, and then Classic Horror Movies Part 3. If you like this video, or you think others might, please support the channel by hitting the like, share, and subscribe buttons to continue to get support from this channel. The Raven thanks you, as always, for your time and support watching the show. If you want to reach out to me on social media, I'm on Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven, on Twitter at LewisBrightRave2. If you want to see some of my artwork, it's at deviantart.com/BrightRaven. You've been watching Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven, exclusively on YouTube. If you have questions, comments, you have suggestions for topics you want me to discuss on the show, or you want to commission artwork, anything of that nature, Quoth the Raven LBR72 at gmail.com is the address to reach out to me at. And if I don't get back to you within, say, 24 to 48 hours, try me again at lewisbrightraven at yahoo.com. That's all for now. We'll see you later this afternoon or early evening with what did you get this week. Until then, have a great day.